Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, SOCE, Certificate Programs, Certificate Program in Rural Development, CRD, Revised, MRD, 203 Rural Development, Planning and Management, Block 1 Rural Development Planning, Unit 1 Planning for Rural Development, 1.0 Aims and Objectives. The main objective of this unit is to acquaint you with concepts, need, theories and methodologies and evolution of development planning. Further, our efforts will be to familiarize you with the plan objectives, its horizon and development programs and projects, etc. After reading this unit, you will be able to times explain the significance of planning in development, times discuss major development planning theories, times highlight plan objectives and horizon, times describe rural development planning methodologies, and times explain development programs, projects, project life cycle, and the evolution of development planning in India. 1.1 Introduction. You must be aware that gradually rural development planning has gained prominence. The global phenomenon of poverty, hunger and recognition of democratic decentralization at the grassroots level has contributed significantly towards planning and implementation of development programs. It has also been realized that organization and structure of planning process needs modification for the effective participation of rural people. This unit will acquaint you with the conceptual, theoretical, and implementational aspects of development planning along with the evolution of development planning in India. 1.2 Development planning, concept, need and theories. Plan is a blueprint of action. Its focus is on precise way to reach given objectives and set of goals with prescribed means in predetermined time. Planning is the process of preparing a plan. Development planning is a process which involves application of a rational system of choices and feasible courses of investment and other possibilities related to development. All these are based on economic and social costs and benefits. You may add new dimensions to this definition, but three things would remain unchanged, viz., the objectives, the blueprint of actions and the resources which have to be used to attain the objectives. Planning objectives are general statements of development goals. The basic objectives of development planning in any welfare state would be to maximize the socio-economic welfare of the people. The specific objectives, however, can vary with the standards of the country, time period and changing social, political and economic values. 1.2.1 Need for development planning. Planning is the process of preparing a blueprint of actions to attain stated objectives within a specified time frame. The determination of objectives, the specification of targets, the strategy for mobilization of resources, the allocation of resources to different development sectors, their operationalization in the shape of policies, programs and their delivery system are major components and must be considered in any planning exercise. Planning is essential because it enables us in formulation with some precision and is aimed to achieve it within a given time frame. Prioritization of objectives enables us to demarcate more significant objectives from the less significant ones. Once this is done, one can decide what is feasible, considering the resources at hand and how additional resources can be mobilized. Therefore, planning is a scientific path to achieve development objectives and bring about economic and social transformation in a systematic manner. Sometimes there can be acute shortage of certain resources or factors. In such a situation, there must be provisions that each of these resources may also have multiple uses. Therefore, planning becomes extremely critical, and having a plan is significant for the utilization of resources in a rational manner. Here, a logical question emerges about the concept of rational manner and available resources. Let us further illustrate it. Suppose the objective is to plan the utilization of unskilled landless labor in a community development block so that people can get gainful employment. Naturally, for it you will gather information on people employed by landowners for agricultural operations, the agricultural operations performed at various point of time, prevalent wage rate. For an appropriate solution, some of these alternatives may be more rational or more desirable or feasible. Thus, choice of alternatives may facilitate the process of identification of preferable alternatives. The manner of arriving at the choice is to know the decision criteria, an important component of planning process at any level. Problems in planning can be identified and consequently can be carried out at national, state, district, block and village level. National and state levels mainly focused on defining the goals of development efforts like population, growth, demand and supply of goods and services, mobilization of domestic and foreign resources, skill development and their allocation in different sectors. Extra district and block level planning are supposed to operationalize effectively plans and projects conceived at national and state level, considering the requirements of concerned areas. The need for planning in India. In every country, some development occurs naturally, but it might not be enough to maintain a desirable standard of living in the country. Therefore, some sort of government intervention initiatives are required for socio-economic and political development of the country. Today, every country is putting their best efforts at its level best in planning and regulating its economic activities. A developing economy like India is characterized by unequal distribution of income and resources. In India, majority of population live in rural areas. Increasing poverty in rural areas along with unequal distribution of resources makes rural development a challenging task. There are also regional imbalances and problems connected with the development of special areas which have geographical and ecological disadvantages, i.e., desert and drought-prone areas, flood-prone areas, etc. Thus, planning in India has to address the problems of rural areas and rural people. The people who are the focus of development and the poor should be given priority because their numbers are large and they are the most vulnerable. In India, vast numbers of the rural poor have limited access to social services, and these are reflected in low rates of literacy, high incidences of infant and child morbidity and mortality, poor health and nutrition status, poor environmental sanitation and hygiene, limited access to potable water and poor housing. The central approach to development planning in India should be for enabling the poor and other disadvantaged sections of rural society to improve their social and economic conditions. Here, logical question emerges about the concept of rational manner and available resources. Let us further illustrate it. Suppose the objective is to plan the utilization of unskilled landless labor in a community development block so that people can get gainful employment. Naturally, for it you will gather information on people employed by landowners for agricultural operations, the agricultural operations performed at various point of time, prevalent wage rate, government schemes employing rural labor and usefulness of those works from the point of view of creating durable community assets and so on. For an appropriate solution, some of these alternatives may be more rational or more desirable or feasible. Thus, choice of alternatives may facilitate the process of identification of preferable alternatives. The manner of arriving at the choice is to know the decision Criteria, an important component of planning process at any level. Problems in planning can be identified and consequently can be carried out at national, state, district, block and village level. National and state levels mainly focus on defining the goals of development efforts like population, growth, demand and supply of goods and services, mobilization of domestic and foreign resources, skill development and their allocation in different sectors. District and block level planning are supposed to operationalize the plans and projects conceived at national and state level. 1.2.2 Development Planning Theories. Considerable advances in concepts and theories of planning for economic development have been made during the recent past. There are many approaches to development being evolved and tried, and a number of alternative theories have been put forth. Since the main objective of planning in the initial stages was growth, the main attention was focused on modeling the production structure of the economy and identifying the factors limiting its expansion. These theories are readily applied to most of the developing countries in which industry sector has a predominant share in the total output, as the concept of distribution, social justice, came to be recognized as an important objective. The growth planning models started including a set of disaggregated regions or spatial areas in their framework. Thus, the multisectoral models have been proposed to include factors affecting the income levels of different groups. This development during the 60s and 70s paved the way for regional development planning theories. Regional development planning theories. The earlier approaches to regional development evolved in industrially developed Western countries were mainly growth-oriented and presumed that higher growth could be achieved through modern sector activities. However, the concepts of generating higher growth in regional economy were different in different development theories or models. The various types of regional development theories with their implications to rural regional planning are shown in Table 1. Theory and associated policy planning models approaches. 1. Economic base theory, export base models, multiplier analysis. 2. Macro economic growth theories. Input-output models. 2. Tinbergen planning model, net incremental capital output ratios for sectors industries. 3. Social cost-benefit analysis, maximize internal rate of return on capital investment. 3. Polarized development. Diffusion theory, central place theory, propulsive, firm concept, growth pole center. Strategies. Intermediate size cities as counter-magnate to primate cities. 2. Lower order centers as foci for development from below. Urban-based accelerated industrialization. 2. To sector growth models. 3. Large-scale capital-intensive, resource-based projects. 4. Agriculture land use theories. 1. Thunen model, agricultural land use zoning or regionalization with locational advantages. 2. Decentralized multilevel planning, Indian context. There are several objective functions in development planning theories. The important objective functions, however, can be categorized into two. First is maximization of production by optimum utilization of natural resources, labor and capital. As a result, an increase in production efficiency through better management and technology is expected. This is called the growth objective of development. It maximizes employment to achieve greater productive forces and increases mass consumer demand. Second is the objective of social justice, which requires minimization of levels of inequality between social classes, rural and urban population or regions, the priority development of backward classes and regions, and the abolition of mass poverty. Third is the promotion of people's participation in the planning and implementation of development programs by empowering, strengthening of Panchayati Raj institutions. 1.3 Rural Development Planning Methodologies. In the beginning, the approach to development was regional with emphasis on growth points and location of economic activities. Over the years, there has been shift in the national policy for rural development to achieve growth with distributive justice by minimizing income inequalities between various sections of the society and growth disparities between areas and regions. To achieve these objectives, area approach and target group approach were added in the framework. Based on the progressive changes in the approach, the methodologies evolved for rural development planning can be described under three categories. I. Growth Center Approach. The basic ideology behind this approach is that the process of development in rural areas can be fostered by increasing resource mobility, for which infrastructure development is a prerequisite. Infrastructural facilities cannot be provided in each village because of two main reasons: A. Financial constraints, and B. Economic efficiency of investment, i.e., locating facilities at appropriate places, because all villages cannot provide minimum threshold population or resource area to optimize the use of facilities. The concept of rural growth center to identify ideal locations for the investment and also as a focus for inducing growth in the area was regarded as the framework of planning. The concept of rural growth center as a framework for rural planning ignores the potentiality of the local economic forces and emphasizes induced growth, which seems to be impracticable under Indian rural conditions. The other problem is that the growth centers do not take into consideration the future trends of repolarization of socio-economic activities taking place in an area. 2. Area Development Approach. Area Development Approach is an addition to the growth center approach and takes into account the local factors of economic growth. The integrated development of an area not only depends on the development of optimum infrastructural network but also the way factors of local economy are activated around the production and infrastructure. In other words, for integrated development of an area, spatial and functional integration is necessary. Thus, while rural growth centers provide ideal locations for the provision of infrastructural facilities, their hinterlands were regarded as basis of planning units for integrated multisectoral planning to achieve integrated development of an area. This approach, therefore, was able to provide a wider framework for rural development. This approach, while taking area poverty into consideration, provides a balance between various sectoral activities as well as spatial pattern of growth. It does not ensure that economic growth is being shared by all classes and communities of the rural area. The spread effect of development may not necessarily affect the whole society with uniformity or with greater equality, particularly in Indian rural situations, because of two reasons. A. In the areas where modern farm technology has not been able to make an advance, agriculture and its allied activities cannot absorb fully the labor available in villages, and B. A sizable number of rural people have little, many of them have no, accessibility of the resources, particularly the land. 3. Integrated rural development approach in the context of problems in the area. Development approach as discussed above and the government policy to tackle the problem of rural poverty. A new strategy of rural development with target group approach has been incorporated in the Area Development Planning Framework. The methodology for integrated rural development (IRD) planning, therefore, includes three dimensions in a common framework: A. Rural Growth Center Approach, B. Area Development Approach, and C. Target Group Approach 1.4 Plan Objectives and Horizon. The focus of development plans, as you have already learnt, has been on the transformation of rural areas, keeping social, economic, technological and cultural horizons in view. The objectives of plans have appeared in successive 5-year plans as the national planning objectives. Therefore, the primary characteristic of block plan and district plan must be in consistency, since these are part of the national and state plan. Thus, the level of planning below the national level should satisfy this requirement of consistency. 1.4.1 Plan Objectives. Keeping above in the view the main objectives of district and block level planning may be summed up as following. 1. Maximization of production in agriculture and allied activities by the use of most cost-effective techniques and methods. 2. Improvement in the living conditions of the poorest section of rural society. 3. Removal of unemployment and underemployment. 4. Provision of basic amenities by the state like drinking water, elementary education, adult literacy, healthcare, rural roads and housing. Extra. To achieve the plan objectives, a comprehensive and integrated area plan is required, which should cover entire rural population. For it, the target population can be broadly categorized into 4 groups. These are as follows. 1. Farm households with land holding of economic size. 2. Farm households with land holding of uneconomic size. 3. Landless agricultural laborers. And 4. Rural artisans. 1.4.2 Consistency. Consistency means harmony or congruity with various external, environmental conditions, host experiences and internal dynamic condition of the plan. However, the district and block planner have the freedom to choose among nationally given objectives for the following reasons. I. Feasible or relevance, depending on the feasibility or relevance of the national objectives to the district and block. The plan objectives may or may not correspond to the national plan objectives. For instance, the national plan objective of self-reliance, translated at the district and block levels, would imply that exports from the district block to the rest of the country increase to a level at which these can pay for all its imports. Since the district and block are part of the national economy, it is neither closed nor boundary-wise regulated economy. Self-reliance in this sense is therefore not feasible, if not altogether irrelevant, at the district and block levels. 2. Choice of fixing priorities among objectives. Since the specific situation at the district and block levels is quite different from the national scene, their plan may even reverse national priorities among their objectives. For illustration, take the national priority of growth in income placed relatively higher than better distribution of income. Now, there may be highly developed district block which already enjoy per capita income much higher than the national average. 3. Target fixing. A district block, drawing upon their available resources and past experiences, have the freedom to fix their targets lower than, equal to, or greater than the national plan target, depending upon what is feasible for the district block. What is a target? It is quantitative and time-bound task ahead in the future which, given the effort, resources, institutional and organizational arrangements, can be achieved. Therefore, you can see that target is always linked up with time period and effort. If targets are scaled up, then the time period and efforts also have to be increased proportionately in order to achieve the targets. The target can also be used to assess the magnitude of task that lies in the future for achieving the objectives. The information base is a very crucial component in deciding about the length or period of the horizon. In case of a longer horizon, many future uncertainties make it difficult to realistically view the projected future profile. 4. Relationship among plan objectives. there may be either a complementary or a competitive relationship between any two of the block plan objectives. A complementary relationship means that if the plan contributes positively to one objective, it similarly makes a positive contribution to the second as well, or at least does not make a negative contribution. A competitive relationship means that a positive contribution to one objective leads to a negative contribution to the other. There exists, for example, a complementary relation between employment generation and poverty removal, also between poverty removal and better distribution of income as well as of assets. In contrast, there is usually a conflict between higher income growth and its better distribution as well as between higher income growth and higher employment. Perhaps it may be difficult to identify the reason for conflict as it is not at all apparent. In practice, indeed, it operates through an intermediate link that exists between these objectives and the saving investment mechanism. A higher income growth requires a higher rate of saving and investment out of the given income, whereas a better distribution of this income necessarily means relatively more of it going to those who have less capacity to save and therefore a relatively lower overall rate of saving and investment and of income growth. Perhaps you can identify some more conflicting objectives at the district and block levels, since such conflicts occur typically at the district and block level economy. You have to not only identify the nature of the relationship among plan objectives but also use your instruments and means: public investment, subsidy, credit, levies, fees, public and cooperative forms of property, institutions and organizations in such a way that the district block plan reinforces complementarily among objectives and does not unduly sacrifice one objective in favor of another. Whenever there is a conflict, 1.5 development programs and projects, all rural development programs, planned and executed, can be grouped under two heads: times area-based programs and times target group-oriented programs. Intensive Agriculture District Program (IADP), Drought-Prone Area Program (PAP), Command Area Development Program (CADP), and Desert Development Program (DDP) are some of the area-based programs. Target group-oriented programs, such as the Integrated Rural Development Program (IRDP), are meant for the upliftment of specific sections of the rural society. Every program, whether area-based or target group-oriented, is made up of a set of development projects. For example, Command Area Development includes On-Farm Development Project, project for the creation of infrastructural facilities, canal modernization project, and so on. Sets of projects form a development program. Therefore, development projects can be called the building blocks of a development program. Let us examine the meaning of a development project. Every project requires different types of resources, such as material, manpower, machinery, and finance. A development project is a time-bound task to achieve specifically stated objectives with investment of resources. It, in contrast to a scheme, is a very specific activity in a specific area to achieve specific result within a specified time frame. 1.5.1 Advantages and disadvantages of development projects. Advantages: the development projects times concentrate resources on select priorities, times focus on specific geographic areas, times address specific population groups and constraints on development, times function as intensive social laboratories using an innovative approach, a limited scale to gain experience for larger scale efforts. 2. Disadvantages. Some of the disadvantages are listed below. The development projects times function as segmented units of intervention, times bypass overall structures, times create enclaves, times siphon resources away from parallel non-project activities, times cannot always generate sustainable development. Times often overlook socio-structural and institutional variables in most cases. 1.5 Point to project life cycle. The project, from conception to operationalization, passes through various stages in a cyclical fashion. These stages constitute the project life cycle. First, a project idea is floated. The idea of project may come from the concerned department, the village assembly, block-level bodies, the target groups, voluntary bodies engaged in development work, scientific and technical research groups, or the central planning agency. Subsequently, the floated idea has to be tested for its worthiness before preparing a blueprint. A sound judgment based upon experience and available knowledge of the local conditions can be the only guide to this decision. However, once a project idea has been identified and accepted, work on the preparation of its blueprint has to begin in the department concerned. A continuous interaction and feedback among team members is very necessary for successful completion of the task. After the completion of the blueprint, if the project is found admissible, it competes along with other projects of the sector. Further, if it is selected, its implementation is monitored, and finally, the result need to be evaluated. Chart being referred not present. The chart indicates different time phases of a life cycle, the position of the phases with reference to the plan period and the kind of decision and the problems to be solved at different phases follow the sequence shown in the chart. Although each phase has its own specific problems of decision, the overall problem of the pre-plan period is to decide whether the project is worthy of selection for inclusion in the plan. The problems of construction phase are of different nature, where management techniques, when applied, help to answer questions like how to organize work within a time schedule so that a smooth flow of materials and labor to the project is maintained. This also helps the managerial staff in achieving maximum efficiency in construction and operation of the project. 1.6 Rural development planning in India. Even before 1947, the Indian National Congress indicated its commitment to planning and prepared a set of reports, which generated a lot of interest and discussion. Apart from this, some prominent industrialists published in 1944 a document called A Brief Memorandum Outlining a Plan of Economic Development for India. Much earlier in 1934, M. Vishveshwaraya had published a 10-year plan aimed at doubling the national income. Jawaharlal Nehru, first Prime Minister of India, is generally regarded as the architect of planning in India. He viewed planning as a way of developing the country, avoiding the unnecessary rigors of an industrial transition in so far as it affected the lives of the masses living in India's villages. Moreover, he recognized that planning was a positive instrument for resolving imbalances and contradictions in a large and heterogeneous country such as India. The first 3 5-year plans are generally regarded as the most lively phase in India's planning exercise. Thought the first-year plan, 1950 to 55, was basically a simple exercise of putting together programs, targets and outlays. It provided the first milestone in rural development through the launching of the Community Development Program and National Extension Service. India's tryst with planning came with the formulation of the second 5-year plan, 1956 to 1961. P.C. Mahalanobis is generally credited with preparing the blueprint of the second plan. In this plan, focus was on industries. Idea was that industries, by providing employment, will give relief to the excess population of rural India. Primarily, it was strategy of industrialization. The plan document included a very lucid chapter titled Land Reform and Agrarian Reconstruction. Emphasis and hopes were placed on cooperative farming practices in Indian agriculture. The formulation also envisaged a vast network of community development programs, national extension services and an irrigation network financed by public budgets. The concept of democratic decentralization for assigning development responsibilities to Panchayati Raj institutions was also advocated by the Balwantarai Mehta Committee. Among the priorities listed in the third plan, 1961 to 1966, it was generally recognized that agriculture had the first place. Thus, in its initial formulation, at least, the third plan differed from the second plan. It is generally recognized that the third plan attempted to reverse this. The main objectives related to rural development in this plan was to secure an increase in national income over 5% per annum and to achieve self-sufficiency in food, grains and increase in agriculture production. Between 1966 and 1969, 3 annual plans were formulated. These annual plans were notable for the formulation of a clear-cut strategy of agricultural development. The fourth five-year plan, 1969 to 1974, gave emphasis to planning and agricultural transformation strategy. During this plan, Green Revolution came into existence. It was also realized that distributive justice still remains a distant dream. The outcome was the popular slogan Garibi Hatao. It gave emphasis to poverty alleviation as distinct planning objective. The fifth five-year plan, 1974 to 1979, was formulated against the backdrop of severe inflationary pressure. Major objectives of the plan were to achieve self-reliance and adopt measures for raising the consumption standard of people living below poverty line. The 1970s are significant for rural development because during this period Minimum Needs Program, IRDP, rural employment programs and some other development programs were introduced. The sixth five-year plan, 1980 to 1985, again took eradication of poverty as its primary objective. Consequently, the programs of poverty eradication were introduced. The programs like NREP, RLEGP, TRYCM, DWCRA, IRDP were strongly emphasized. The strategy was adopted to move simultaneously towards strengthening of infrastructure for both agriculture and industries. The seventh five-year plan, 1985 to 1990, continued with emphasis on poverty alleviation as its central theme. Growth of employment, opportunities, human resource and infrastructure development, removal of inequalities, an expanded system of food securities, increase in productivity in agriculture and participation of people in development, etc., were identified as priorities areas. In addition to existing programs, Jawahar Rozgar Yojana were launched. Separate annual plans were made in 1990 to 91 and 1992 with basic thrust on the maximization of employment and social transformation. The major initiatives in the 8th five-year plan, 1992 to 1997, were times to enable faster economic growth, times faster growth of manufacturing sector, agriculture and allied sectors. The 9th five-year plan, 1997 to 2002, emphasized priorities to agriculture and rural development with a view to generate adequate productive employment and eradication of poverty. There was emphasis on basic minimum services. These 7 services were identified as 1. Provision of safe drinking water, 2. Availability of primary health facilities, 3. Universalization of primary education, 4. Public housing to shelterless poor families, 5. Nutritional support children, 6. Connectivity of all villages and habitations and 7. Streamlining of public distribution system with focus on poor, the 10th five-year plan. 2002 to 2007 the plan was approved by the National Development Council on 21st September 2002. It recognized the rapid growth in the labor force and aimed at the creation of 50 million job opportunities during this period. It has emphasized on employment-intensive sectors of agriculture, irrigation, agroforestry, small and medium enterprise, information and communication technology, and other services. The plan addresses the issues of poverty and the low levels of social indicators. The 10th plan has identified measures to improve efficiency, unleash entrepreneurial energy and promote rapid and sustainable growth. Agriculture was core element in this plan. Midterm appraisal of the plan identified many policy initiatives to overcome the weaknesses of the performance of the economy. Major priority areas of action were times investment in irrigation and water management, times fertilizer pricing, times improving the effectiveness of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, times National Rural Health Mission, times small-scale industries, etc. The 11th five-year plan, 2007 to 2012, the plan aimed to achieve improved quality of life for the citizens and to contribute to the larger national goals of socio-economic development. The major objectives of plan were times to achieve overall growth rate of 6%. It was envisaged that agriculture and allied sector will contribute 5% of growth, times to reduce poverty levels from 38% to 25% of growth, times to achieve literacy rate of 84% by the end of the plan, times to eliminate gender disparity in elementary education, times to bring down population growth rate to 1.62% by 2012, times to improve health parameters. To provide sustainable access to safe potable drinking water to all. Independent habitations, times to empower women and weaker section of society through socio-economic development, times to expand existing irrigation facilities, times to develop strong infrastructure to provide power to all villages, times to provide connectivity to all weather roads to all villages of population, over 1,000 in general and 500 in tribal areas, times to encourage use of information and communication technologies to bridge digital divide, etc. The 12th five-year plan, its duration was from 2012 to 2017, its main theme was faster, sustainable and more inclusive growth, and its target of growth rate was 8%. Major objectives of 12th five-year plan were times to ensure access to proper drinking water in rural areas, times to provide electricity to all villages, times to provide access to banking services to 90% of households, times to enhance access to higher education, times to remove gender and social gap in school enrollment, times to reduce malnutrition among children aged 0 to 3 years. The first Independent Evaluation Office, IEO, submitted its assessment report to Prime Minister Modi on 29 May 2014. On 1 January 2015, Union Cabinet passed a resolution to replace Planning Commission by Niti Aayog, National Institute for Transforming India. The first meeting of Niti Aayog was chaired by Prime Minister Modi on 8 February 2015. Niti Aayog is a policy think tank of Government of India. The main aim for the creation of Niti Aayog is to foster involvement and participation of state government of India in the economic policy making process using a bottom-up approach. It has adopted a bottom-up approach in planning, which is remarkable in contrast to the Planning Commission's tradition of top-down approach in decision-making. One of the important mandates of Niti Aayog is to bring cooperative competitive federalism and to improve center-state relation. It will provide opportunities to represent economic interests of the state, governments and union territories. The aim to achieve sustainable development goals with cooperative federalism by fostering the involvement of state governments of India in the economic policy-making process using a bottom-up approach. Salient features of Niti Aayog. Times Niti Aayog was formed to bring fresh idea to the government and greater level of accountability in the system. Times it took initiatives like Ayushman Bharat and artificial intelligence. Times Niti Aayog push agenda forward in the form of Poshan Abhiyan to tackle the problem of malnutrition among the children. Times Niti Aayog has established a development monitoring office which collects data on performance of various ministries on real-time basis. The data is used at the highest policy-making level. It has significant impact on improving the efficiency of governance and determining the ranking of the state based on performance. Times Niti Aayog has target of doubling farmers' income by 2022. Times Niti Aayog is channelizing additional revenue to health, education, agriculture, rural development, defense, railways and roads. Times it has framed regional strategies for the development of northeastern region, coastal areas and island, desert and drought-prone areas. 1.7 Rural development planning in India. A critique. Traditionally, rural development is centered on the misuse of land-intensive natural resources such as forestry and agriculture. But today, increasing urbanization and change in global production networks have transformed the nature of rural areas. Today, rural development still remains the core of the overall development of the country. It has become more than two-thirds of the country's people is dependent on agriculture for their livelihood and one-third of rural India is still below the poverty line. Therefore, it is important for the government to be productive and provide enough facility to upgrade their standard of living. Rural development is a complete term that concentrates on the action taken for the development of rural areas, improve the village economy. However, few areas that demand more focused attention and new initiatives are times education, times public health and sanitation, times women empowerment, infrastructure development, e.g. electricity, irrigation, etc., times facilities for agriculture extension and research, times availability of credit, times employment opportunity. The state has enormous say over the country's economic and social development and also on the fact as to whether that development is sustainable or not. Its potential to leverage, promote and transform in pursuit of collective end is unmatched. The economy of the state has flourished where the state has used this potential effectively. Indian approach to rural development planning may be classified in two broad categories as described by the World Bank in 1960. These are improvement and transformation approach. The emphasis in improvement approach is upon the improvement of production and organization of production in peasant farming, while the transformation is involved in the implementation of various land reform measures or in the creation and establishment of new kind of rural society. Analysis of 5-year plans in India makes it clear that postulates of these two approaches have always existed throughout the context of rural development planning. The nomenclature, shape and emphasis on these components varied from plan to plan. In the implementation of plans and programs related to rural development, wide gaps have been observed between apparent motives and actual achievements. We are aware that mechanism of rural development represents the confluence of social, economic, political and bureaucratic forces. Therefore, rural development in India was bound to face these complex problems. 1.8 Summary. In this unit, efforts have been made to acquaint you with the concept, need, and theories of development planning. This unit have also familiarized you with rural development planning methodologies. It also provided an understanding about plan and objectives and horizons development, programs and projects. This unit will also provide an understanding about the major themes of rural development in various 5-year plans in India. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.